Right. Well, it's good to see a lot of familiar faces. Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Aloha, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Ah,
Good morning.
good morning.
I see everybody's got their beverages going. This morning, I have a green smoothie going on. So, cheers, everyone. Good morning. Awesome. And then there's those people that have been up for hours because they're trying to catch Zoom presentations on the East Coast. That was not me today. So this is actually my first meeting. So it's really good to see everyone. Hello.
All right, Joel. We'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. We have a nice intimate group this morning in our IEU speaker series. I want to thank Joel for joining us this morning and presenting for us. I hope everybody is doing well and staying healthy. And I'd like all of us to put our hands on our heart and let's send out good wishes to Amanda, who couldn't be here today. So we definitely want to wish Amanda well. I see a good friend of mine, Chris McIntyre. Thank you for joining us. And Danielle Lansing. I haven't seen her in a really long time. Melody, thank you for joining us today. It's always good to see you. All right, let's go ahead. I'll have Felice go ahead and introduce our guest today.
All right. Well, so when we sent out the call for presenters, Joel was one of the very first emails that popped into my email box. And we were really excited because the topic alone is really interesting, really very relevant. I'm excited to hear what he has to say. And so it's really exciting that he's here. In 2002, he was awarded the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science and Teaching and for Secondary Science in Hawaii. So that is a very incredible honor. And then again in 2017, he was awarded the National Science Teachers Association Shell Teacher of the Year. So we're just so blessed to have you here. We're thankful for everything that you're going to share with us, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Mahalo, Felice. What I'm going to share with you today, sometimes people don't attend this because they think, well, I'm not in the classroom. Well, but the bottom line is that even the things that I share with you, you should think about it if you have kids. This is the way that they should prepare. We get to the end of this, and there's going to be kind of like a going forward thing that I just put into my presentation that I did with the kids this year. And you can share it with colleagues, share it with administrators, and you're going to see. All I can say is basically it's not just for your classroom. It's also for everybody's classroom. Okay, so I'm going to get to the PowerPoint and give you a lot of the history, and it's going to be part history, part storytelling. A little bit of maybe we'll do. Let's see. Let's get into view slideshow. Okay. Now, what this is contact information, and for you guys, if you want to get into the PowerPoint, you can go ahead and go into this. Just go ahead and copy that, or you can actually take a look at it during the, take a picture of it. There's a folder there that has an awful lot of stuff in it. Also, I'm not sure if I have it on here. There's a template for teachers to be able to kind of take a look at it, since almost everybody looks at things through a Western lens. But how do you switch over to looking at it through a native lens? And so this the template will help you kind of organize the information and then be able to start working with it. And for the teachers that I've been working with, the first lesson plan that they do, or the first lessons that they modify, that really gets them a lot of momentum. And then from there, they just end up, growing from there. Mrs. Krause, I think, is the next step. Mrs. Dorothy Mount Pleasant Krause was an elder. The Tuscarora Nation, where I grew up, is the sixth of the Six Nations. You may be familiar with that the group in the Northeast, and it was the basically they moved back up into their native lands in the early 1700s. And Mrs. Krause was an elder, and you're going to hear a lot about her history, but she was a co-author of the Tuscarora English Dictionary that was published, I think, in 1999. So she was not only just an elder, but she was fluent in a language that was endangered back then, and also way back in the 70s and 80s, actually published culture-based lesson plans. It's like, man, she was like way before her time. Now, over here, then, she was my teacher in 1st grade and 5th grade, okay? And my elder cousin, the approach that she used in 1st grade, I don't really remember since I was just a little rascal back then, but in 5th grade, I have very vivid memories of all the things that she did. And she was easily the best teacher that I've ever had. Was engaged from the moment I came into the classroom. I loved it. I excelled. She basically recommended me for honors 6th grade, where I was horrible because it was a lecture class. And so, but she told me one thing that was super important. She really told me that I was really smart. And so, and I was convinced coming out of her class that I was really smart, and it really changed the view of myself relative to education. Okay. Now, she also, what she said is she started with culture. She started with culture. Culture is relevant, and it was established early. Now, she would have us learn something about the culture or learn something early on, and then we would come back and then we would use it. And that was important, because what happened with respect to that was that allowed us to build a foundation. And that was what I figured out later on was I need to go back. She allowed us to build a foundation and then build upon that. And all of this, and the thing that I found in the last 5 years is all of these current topics that you will have, like project-based learning, things like inquiry, things like collaborative learning, and all of those. They're native culture. That's how our ancestors taught. So, in which case, every one of those new in-services will do. I think to myself, well, I did that in 1966. Mrs. Krause was doing. So the trend in Western education is to shift back to where the way that we've always taught. Okay, and that's going to become a lot more clear as we go on. Okay, this picture up here up the top, this is a picture I had of here. This isn't my class. This was in the 50s. I didn't have any pictures of her when I was a kid, but the bottom line is that I got the ones that I could find. Here, right here, she's in the middle. She's kind of like, this was a planning committee, okay? Now, the planning committee was relative to this next slide, okay? In 1956, the government condemned about 1/5 of the reservation, and that was actually for the Niagara Power Project, Niagara Power Authority. But the problem with that was, and the tribe basically was not real happy with it. It caused major conflicts, up from 56 to 58, and that was tribal land. But the government went and took it away, as the government likes to do, But then after that, how that impacted her was this is a picture from the newspaper. Mrs. Krause had her house and their burial ground. They upped it and moved it to Lewiston, off the reservation. Okay, and so her being in that planning commission and testifying in front of Congress. Really, they moved her off the reservation from teaching, and the school that I had her in, for 1st grade was just right on the other side of the reservation line, and so, but she still continued to basically be an advocate and for this and was really, it was very traumatic to her. Now, the interesting thing is, many of you may know Daryl Tonema, who's the psychologist. Well, his family's house was right next door to where Mrs. Krause's house was relocated to. So that is actually interesting, that she went through a lot of trauma, and Daryl is now working with us on the trauma. Okay, now, so I learned from Mrs. Krause that I was actually pretty smart, but I did not do well. And at the end of the presentation, you're going to see some of my report cards, which are going to show how well I did in a Western classroom and how well I did in a traditional teaching classroom. When I started at Kamehameha and on the Oahu campus in 1987, I just naturally gravitated towards teaching with Mrs. Krause's methods. It would seem very natural to me. It was just intuitive. And I saw a picture in the newspaper and a story about Papa Henry Awai, traditional healer, the top healer in Hawaii, and he was recognized as a Smithsonian treasure. And when he went and presented at the Smithsonian Festival of Folk Arts, in Washington, D.C., and for the 12 years that I knew him, he worked with our kids, but he did something that really kind of struck me. All of the kids had to research. Oh, well, let me give you a little bit more of a background on that program that I did. I had the kids come in the summer for 6 weeks, and they would pick a Hawaiian medicinal plant or marine organism. Okay? And then for 5 days, they spent the first day just digging out everything they could, from the cultural knowledge to the botanical knowledge to any research that was done on it, growing conditions, you name it. And it had to be a Hawaiian medicinal plant that was present pre-Captain Cook. So it was endemic or Polynesian introduced. It wasn't more modern folk medicine. And then I would work and teach them organic chemistry, the analytical chemistry of separation, microbiology and cell bio, and nuclear magnetic resonance and mass spectroscopy, so that they could analyze it. And the kids started on a super science fair project where they would isolate the active components and test them against bacteria and cancer cells, and then continue it on and work to determine the structure. Well, we would fly over to the Big Island and spend a day just meeting with Papa Awai. And the kids, he said, the kids had to know all of the knowledge coming in so that they could ask good questions, and that he in turn can help them and ask them more good questions. It was the questioning back and forth. It was the inquiry. And so, but they had to have that prior knowledge, that base of knowledge prior to coming to him. And then I thought about this and I thought, oh, that's like Mrs. Krause. We had to build some prior knowledge. Now and he confirmed that this was the way that he learned when he was a youth back in the 19-teens in a community where Hawaiian was the first language on the Big Island. Well, in 1995, what I did was I had to do an oral interview with him to get him his diploma. He'd been kicked out of Kamehameha in 1921 for speaking Hawaiian, but we had a program that if you did an oral history, that they would award him the diploma. So I talked to him for like most of a day. And we talked extensively about the method that, with the way that the kids were taught over there in Kauai High, by the teachers and by the elders. And it was just confirmed Mrs. Krause's method, the Tuscarora method. So that actually, to me, was kind of like, okay, there's really something to this. So I kept doing what I was doing, but still working on refining it. Okay. Now, in the Summer Institute, and this was actually proved to me that what we were doing was really, really working. The students, during that time period, during the 13 years, we had 19 students advance to the International Science Fair and actually place 4th place or higher, and many got college scholarships. We stopped counting. And this, the gentleman here with the lab coat on, Lane Richards, went from being a student to a lab assistant to a teacher in my program, and is now a principal. You've got a brand new position as a principal at the Kamehameha Oahu campus, and it's a principal in innovation and Hawaiian culture-based programs. Well, he kept track of it. We stopped counting when we got to over $1 million in prize money. But one of the biggest things that I realized was we had this girl, Tricia, who applied coming out of 8th grade. You could be anywhere from 9th grade to 12th grade. Tricia, what she did was she applied and she had the most passionate essay. Her GPA was not that good. Her GPA was only 2.8. She was the lowest of any of the applicants, but the passion was there. And I said, I'm going to take a chance on her. And she turned out to be just an incredible student. So her GPA showed how she was doing in a Western classroom. In that classroom with the Summer Science Institute, she was an A student. She ended up placing very high at the State Science Fair and got a full ride scholarship to Chaminade University for science, and is now, she's actually the head nurse at one of the local hospitals on Oahu. So you can't judge our kids, and this is the lesson that I want everybody to think about. You can't necessarily judge your kids by GPA, by a regular Western method, unless you really know exactly how they were taught. Okay. Now, from there then, and if you're involved with NIEA, you probably know Walter Kahamoku, who is kind of everywhere. He recruited me to start teaching teachers. I did a workshop for him in 2014, and then started working with the Windward District in 2015. And so he recruits me to help out whenever he has the opportunity to work with STEM teachers, and I owe a real debt of gratitude to him, because you have to think outside the box a little bit more when you have to teach it to a teacher to help them be able to incorporate this. And so it really caused me to, okay, I got to continue to work on bringing my A game so that I can help share this. Okay. Now, this is what I want to do is, I don't have control of this. Well, I'd have to exit out of let me see if I can exit out of this for a moment. And see is it possible for you guys to send, Felice, could you send them into breakout rooms for 4 minutes and just put them in groups of 3. And I want people to just talk about why are some students not successful? That's the first question. And also, which ones can we impact? Which of those reasons can we not impact? Is it possible for you to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Okay, here we go. Hey, Joel.
Are you ready to bring them back?
Sure.
Okay.
We're back, Joel.
Okay, well, let's get back to the share screen. Okay, let me do a share screen again. These are the factors that we're going to address today. If we went around and compiled, and I did this one time, we compiled the list, and the list was huge. It was really huge, because a lot of people have their own unique challenges in their classroom or their students. But I wanted to do these ones, and at this point, and I know we have a lot of great teachers, educators in here. You probably do a lot of them, but if you see any one that you haven't really thought about, you can kind of add that to your toolbox. For kids, if they don't connect with the material or examples, I remember going through school, and it really just, if it wasn't interesting to me or I had no clue, I would just be looking out the window wishing I was outside. Vocabulary and sentence structure, if we're going to get to that, that can actually be a big disengager for the students, and we'll talk more extensively about that. So I'm going to go through the list actually fairly quickly and then really pick it apart. Okay. If I have a student coming in and it's kind of like, man, I really suck in science. Well, they're going to disengage and give up, at the drop of a pin. That's just the way the kids are. Or if it's not hands-on, if I'm not doing activities or something, it's just, you can't just sit and stare at a book all day long and have it not be real. So if you think about our traditional learning, it was hands-on. And a lot of these things you're going to be able to kind of evaluate that the way the elders taught. These weren't barriers. Okay, so let's continue on. The next one. This one is new. Students are skimmers. I'm not sure whether it happened before, but if it's longer than a tweet, they just kind of zip through the page and assume that they know it. And you're going to know this one because what happens is if you have them working on some inquiry and they ask you a question, and if you look up at the top of the page and the information is right there, you know that they just zipped right past it. So what you do is if that's the case, you just, let's go back and kind of read this a little bit more slowly. But it's very common. Passive versus active learners. The students do not have a foundation at all, and so they're trying to absorb everything in a short period of time, and the brain can't retain it and process it. So Mrs. Krause and Papa Owai, they made sure the kids were active learners. Mrs. Krause, we always built a foundation to begin with, and then added to that foundation. Lack of organization. You know, everybody has kids who take all of the papers or whatever and just kind of stuff it into their gym bag, and it's kind of like just a big mess. Well, for summatives, a regular Western summative, you're going to have organized information. So, and I'll talk more about this, but if they don't have that organized information to study or a plan to study, then they're not going to be as successful. Okay? A lot of teachers, they have it. Everybody's just kind of sitting there by themselves, working everything. That's not how kids learn, and that's not how, that traditionally people learned. You need to have them be able to talk. And so I have the kids working in groups. The students are not willing to ask for help. Oh, that's a big one. But I got solutions to that. When I just gave a presentation to the UH West Oahu professors, there were two students in there who, and one had been a student at the Kamehameha Oahu campus while I was there, and another one was from the mainland. And what they both said was, I went all the way through graduate school, and I was always afraid to ask for help. So in which case, if they don't ask for help, they have some type of a barrier there that they're not asking for you to help them get over. Okay? And they let the internet do the thinking for them. And we're going to talk about that. If they just Google every answer, they don't really know how to, that's not building any foundation. They're just kind of filling in boxes. Okay? So those are the 11 that I focused on, and I focus on with my class to remove the barriers within the class. Okay? And so the goal will be to remove the barriers and put the students in a place where it's a very fun, enjoyable, safe place, and they have to figure stuff out to develop critical thinking skills. That's another one that's new. It's critical thinking skills. They talk about that. Well, it's kind of like that was part of traditional learning. So taking it into the students' world. Topic is introduced and pre-assessed while using culture right from the beginning. I lead with culture, always lead with culture. If you have culture from the beginning into a lesson that you're doing, it shows the students that it is critical. And the culture is foundational. They understand it, so they develop it. They don't have to sit and learn about something that's kind of like they're clueless on. It's not some obscure example. And so I introduce it from the beginning, just like Mrs. Krause did, just like Papa Owai wanted us to do, and pre-assessing right from the beginning. Now, for background reading, this is what I did. And I didn't realize this until later on, that there was never any reading or thing that I had to do for Mrs. Krause where I didn't know the vocabulary, where the sentence structure was too complex. So what I will do is, our school has purchased the textbooks. I will scan them, open them up in Adobe Acrobat, and edit them to put in humor, to put in questions that I want in there, to take out, make sure that there isn't vocabulary in there that makes no sense to the kids. I teach 10th grade, but I have kids who read as low as the 6th grade reading level. If I hit them with all this advanced vocabulary, it's no wonder these kids have struggled. So I have to try to make it to the point of where the background reading, these kids can work on it, understand it, and build the foundation. Okay? What I do is, I've always done is, I've told the kids, and this for years, if you don't understand the question, on a test, the wording of the question on the test or a vocabulary word, raise your hand. And because I tell them, I don't want you to get it wrong because you don't understand some word. I want you to be able to get it right based on your chemistry knowledge, or if you get it wrong, you're having problems with that particular chemistry concept. And so if they raise their hand, and then I go over and I say, okay, well, chemo did this and this and this and this, why didn't it say that? And then I'll go onto my computer and I'll adjust it for the next class or the next year. So it's a constant revision to make sure that the vocabulary, the context, the sentence structure are not getting in the way of them learning or in the way of their being assessed. I put their names in. Oops, got to go back. Okay, I put their names in there, which I'm going to show you, into all of these, and kind of have some fun with it, and we're going to see. And I always ask the kids if it's okay if I put their names in there. I've only ever had one person say, no, I don't want my name in there. Her name was Rachel Tanaka. She didn't want them in there, and you're going to see how I use them. And then 2 weeks later, she goes, Mr. Truesdell, she raised her hand and said, Mr. Truesdell, how come you never put my name in the assignments or the different materials? And all the kids started laughing. I said, because you asked me not to. So after that, we put her name into a lot of them. But also, do storytelling. I want you to think about this. Every elder that you think is, you can think about as being a wise elder, they were storytellers. They were not only wise in terms of the material, but they were storytellers, which really made it clear as to what it was that was what they were having you learn or understand. So for 7 years, the first assignment that I had for the kids was to research and report out the best growing conditions for the canopy for a native forest, the endemic tree koa. And then about a week later, they would come in and they would share all of their wisdom. And had to talk to an elder. We had to get them talking. The way that ancient wisdom is passed along from elder to the youth, if there's no discussions, it's not being passed. So we have multiple points during the year that they have to go and talk to an elder. And Mrs. Krause had me do this too. Okay, so they had to be prepared to share their wisdom. And what you have here is 2 weeks in, the kids are given the koa seedlings and they're putting them in a pot, and they're going to be raising them for a period of time to learn how to grow the endemic trees, endemic plants. At the end of 4 or 5 months, then we plant them out and back. We're establishing a native forest back there. And the students, it's hands-on. The kids are learning, and they do learn a lot of chemistry during this whole process. But the culture is first. And that actually kind of gets the students to the point of where they know the culture is important. Now, crafting the language and the vocabulary. I love Gary Larson, in Farside. I saw this. I actually remember this one, and I thought, oh, yeah, I can use this. If we come in and the teacher is talking to the student, and the teacher goes, okay, chemo, to take the negative log of the hydronium ion chemo to determine the pH of your food. Well, if the student understands all of those things, the concept and the words, the vocabulary and the structure, then the kid is good. But what if they're not? This is what they hear if they don't know the language of the structure or anything. Blah, 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 chemo, blah, 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 chemo, blah, 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 blah. Okay? That's what they hear. So in which case, the student the barrier is going to be there, and they're not going to get it, and then they're going to begin the disengagement. Okay? Now, passive versus active learners. If I were to give out the reading assignment to my students from the book and say, go home, read this, come in, be an active learner. And I give it to them and they read it and it doesn't make any sense. I'll probably have 20 to 30% of the kids that are actually ready to go. Kids will give up halfway through and they say, well, I looked at it, but I didn't understand it, so I gave up. Now they're passive learners. Now the passive learner is trying to take all of the information in, process it, try to retain it, and use it as you're continuing to build on it in a short period of time. But if they come in having built a foundation of knowledge, either through some activity, through some reading, through some storytelling, or whatever method it is, they've built on it. Now the next activity they do is they are building on a base, as opposed to building on zero. So in which case, there's a lot of ways that you can do it to try to build that base and be an active learner in class. Now, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here, everything that I'm going over, I teach to the kids at the beginning. All about active and passive learning, all about the utilizing cultural information, making sure that you ask questions, making sure that you get clarifications on the vocabulary. So I teach the kids the exact same thing that I'm presenting today, so that they know that if they want to take control of their learning, this is the game plan. Okay. Now, all students were successful in traditional teaching. Everybody was successful in Mrs. Krause's class. We had no failures. And the interesting thing is, the last failure that I had in chemistry, all of our students are required to take chemistry at the 10th grade. All of them. It doesn't matter whether they're a struggling student or whether they're a very successful student. In the last 7 years, I haven't had an F period. So teaching in this manner has made so that all of my students are successful. Okay. Now, the normal native learning rollout. And this is what I'm going to show you. And I got different materials to show you. I give them something to read that I have edited. Like I said before, I scan it, Adobe Acrobat, and I give it to them, and they're going to do a little bit of work, and they'll come in and show me what they have, and a lot of the stuff is not just like yes or no. They're having to write and kind of explain things, which shows that they've built a little bit of a foundation. Now, the pre-assessment that I'll show, the pre-assessments are fun. They're absolutely fun, but it stimulates the brain and gets them going. I want to get them kind of thinking about things and figuring stuff out. Then we'll do a hands-on activity that connects to the culture. And again, it's going to have them think and figure stuff out. Then finally, I take them through inquiry, where they're going to be doing stuff and again, reading, analyzing things and figuring stuff out. Finally, after that, then we start doing labs. And one of the big things that I want to stress to people is innovation is a huge topic, correct? Innovation is a huge thing now. I hear about that so much. You can't do innovation well until you've established a really good foundation of knowledge and understanding. Okay, so at this point, when they get done with the inquiry and doing the labs, they have the foundation to be able to innovate. Then that's what I do, is I give them different guidance to do innovations. They may have to redesign the lab or use the lab information that they have to be able to propose something else. I have them do compare and contrasts between the cultural use of something, in a Native American versus a Native Hawaiian culture, and it's all active learning, but they have to have great foundational knowledge. So all the way through the formative stuff, through the figuring stuff out, I don't let them use a computer. After they've established all of this knowledge and understanding, then they go use the computer to figure out how to do the labs, to figure out how to innovate, to study for regular Western summatives that we have. Okay. Now, this is the lack of confidence part of it. They come in and they're basically at this point, it's kind of like, I just kind of suck at this stuff. I'm just not very good. You have to know your students and identify those in the struggle. I take a look at their prior grades. I listen to them talk, and at that point, then my big focus is as they're going through, keep them all engaged. In my lesson plans, I plan the engagement. If I'm transitioning from one activity to the next, what is the transition? How can I sit and kind of keep them engaged? What is the wording that I'm going to use that's going to keep them excited about what they're doing and focused on what they're doing? The other part that I do is if you've got a student who's traditionally struggled, the moment they, and once they go through this, they're going to have some successes. You keep them focused. Student gets an A on a lab or an A on a test or something like that, I'm calling them out. Okay, I'm basically saying, okay, Chemo, you just got an A on this. This is outstanding. And what I tell them is, this actually comes from sports. This is what you're capable of. Anything less than that is really a fluke. So now we just got to keep it going. You got to keep doing what you're doing and just continue to bring your A game. You do that and their confidence will grow. And especially in this class, their native identity is going to grow. Okay. Now, students not willing to ask for help. This is a problem. Okay. I've been into many classrooms, visiting classrooms, spent a lot of time in Tuba City, with our cross-country teams, girls cross-country teams there. And I go in there and I'll sit in the class, and more often than not, okay, just like my class, if I don't do anything, the kids won't ask for help. Okay, so what do? How do you get them over that? I announce on day one, everything at the beginning of the year, you set basically the tenor of the classroom, the culture of the classroom. So I say at the beginning, if you don't understand a word in here, if you don't understand kind of like the structure of something or the example or whatever, I want you to raise your hand and ask. The kids are going to be working in pairs, and sometimes one student will explain it to the other one, but if they don't know, I want them to raise their hand, and I tell them, I'm going to applaud you for taking control of your learning. Okay? And I sit there and I have a little bag of the tiny little Snickers things in there, and the first one that does, I go over, I'm going to applaud you and I'm going to reward you, and I give the student one. Well, it's not long that all of them want the Snickers and whatever, because, kids will do a whole lot for food. But at that point, what I've done is I just work for the first 2 weeks to establish that, and it's not a problem. It is not a problem. Even some of the most reserved kids will start asking for help. They'll raise their hand because there's no stigma attached to it if everybody else is asking. Especially, the ones that are actually asking for just for the candy are actually some of your best students. So the other ones say, well, it's okay, Gillen is asking, so I can ask. So you do that, establish that, and over time, you just continually tell them, I'm proud of you guys for asking for help. Because the bottom line is that you will have roadblocks, in going forward, and you just have to basically just bring your A game by asking for help and getting through that little barrier. Okay, lack of organization. What I have the kids do, I require that they keep a notebook. Now the notebook, the way that I look at it is I want everything in their wording. Okay, and I tell them that. You can take control of it. We call ours Chemistry Book of Secrets, but they can name it any way they want. And they can put, the kids that like to draw, put a lot of artwork in there, and I make comments on their creativity. But the bottom line is that I want them to have, I tell them, I want you to have the notes in your words, everything you're going to need, that when you have to do a regular Western summative, you're going to have all of the information ready to study. You look at it, you know it, everything's covered, and you're ready to go. I want you to, if you take chemistry in college, which most of you will, even just as an elective, you grab your notebook, and that's the solution to you doing well up there. Restrict the use of computers till formative is done. They'll just Google the answers. After they know the formative and they know the concept well, then they use computers extensively to innovate. Okay. So, familiar phenomenon. This is my initial engagement. I give it at the beginning of the unit and at the end of the unit. But at the same time, I never tell them the answer. These kids, it's going to be a puzzling little situation, and they have to look at it, figure out what the best explanation is, and then explain it, develop argumentation skills. But I don't tell them the answer. But as they're working through the unit, they discover it, and it's an aha moment. Ah, now I understand the familiar phenomena, okay? And I make it fun and make it personal. So this is one that you're going to see in a minute, okay? So this stuff is from thermodynamics. So little Spencer put some pork and sweet potato into an emu. In Hawaii, that's an underground oven, okay? So his friends come over. They have some Kahlua pork and sweet potato from the emu the next day. Kahlua pork is cool, but the sweet potato is scalding hot. It gets burned. What happened? Okay, instant answer, Judah. I like to put these adjectives out front, little descriptors, and you make them fun. You know, you don't make it. It can't be anything that's going to be offensive to the students, and usually it's always flattering. Instant answer, Judah, which really describes him. He decides to offer an explanation. Although Kahlua pork was getting hit by the wind more than the sweet potato. No way. The uala was heated to a higher temperature. Kahlua pork loving Nafe. If I'm going to put somebody loves the food, you know, usually it's somebody who's constantly eating and kind of like weighs about 80 pounds, super skinny. I think that the Kahlua pork must have been covering the uala. Crazy Kyla, I think that the uala must have absorbed more heat, therefore will take longer to cool down. Which person do you agree with and why? Okay, now there's no wrong answer to this as long as they have an explanation. Okay, I want them to develop the argumentation skills. And it's getting their minds on what they just did in their pre-reading, heat transfer. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of minutes of this. And this is those kids. And they actually have two of them. I got Nafe right in front over here. Joey is over here. But what happens is, and they have two sheets. You just saw one of them. And so I want you to kind of pay attention. We're going to watch about 2 minutes of this. Okay, Paige Keeley's, go ahead and begin. You like the avatar?
I love it. I love it. Little Spencer.
Oh, cool.
Correct.
It's awesome.
Just very Joey.
Oh, there's two of them.
Yes, there are two of them.
Answer Judah. I mean,
Yeah, I'm going to stop it here. And what you notice is, it's fun, you know, it's engaging, and after they got through the fun part, they did continue. They were focused, they were engaged, and it got really quiet as they were getting into working on their explanations and figuring it out. And that was the key. You know, at the beginning of the class, I got them focused with the humor, with the pre-assessment, and after that, now they're focused on the topic. Now, the next thing I had them do is, this is kind of a lot of writing here, but I'm just going to explain what they did. It's called the Predict, Explain, Observe. They'd already done some stuff on collecting Hawaiian salt. Collecting salt is a cultural thing, you know, and the different places where people live, the different areas have different methods of doing that, but it was necessary for our survival. So we took them through this. They actually did the cultural practice and learned a lot of chemistry during the salt collection from Hawaiian salt, which comes from the ocean. And so now what they're going to do is, and it's about, remember, it's about heat transfer and thermodynamics. They're going to take and put, have little baggies where they have a certain amount of salt in there and add water in. They've got regular sodium chloride, they got calcium chloride and sodium bicarbonate. And the question is, does it get hot and give off heat, or does it get cool and absorb heat? And so they're looking at the heat either given off or absorbed during the chemical reaction. So in which case, it just takes them into the next part of this. And the background information is they've already done a lab on this. So they know a lot about Hawaiian salt. So they have to make a prediction. They have to explain the prediction, whether it's going to get hot or cold and why. And then they actually have to observe it. So I'm going to what I've got this is, I had one of my kids explain this. This is Ho'onani. So let's see if I can get this going. And she'll give a very quick, kids are actually doing the lab in the back. We messed this explanation up so many times that a lot of the kids are already done. So, but you got them.
Aloha, my name is Joel Truesdell, and I'm the Shell Science Teacher of the Year. I'm proud to be teaching Hawaiian culture-infused chemistry here at the Kamehameha Schools on the Big Island of Hawaii. Now I'm going to have one of our students, top students, Ho'onani, explain exactly what we're doing today.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Ho'onani Mekong, and I'm here in Honors Chemistry Period 3. We just finished doing a page Keeley worksheet to pre-assess familiar phenomena. We also did a PEO worksheet, or Predict, Explain, and Observe. We just finished the Predict and Explain part, and we are doing the observations in 3 stations. In these 3 stations, we are measuring temperature change when 3 different components of Hawaiian salt or pa'akai are added to water. Data collected will be used in process-oriented guided inquiry, or POGO, on specific heat and heat of reaction.
Aloha.
Hey, no.
Okay, so they do that. Then the next thing that they do is they go into inquiry. And I use a lot of storytelling here at the beginning. Okay, Leilani headed down to the end of Chain of Craters Road in Volcano National Park and did a little bit of hula, and she noticed that when her foot is on the lava early in the morning and in the water, it's the same temperature. But when an hour later, the lava is really hot, but the water is still cool, and they're getting the same sun. So why? So that's what they're going to be exploring. They're going to be exploring the actual calculation for this. And in the POGO, I've got to speed up a little bit, I think. When Huaka heats up some lava, notice that the temperature changes depending on how much heat is put in, how big the lava is, things like that. And so in process-oriented guided inquiry, what you do is they've got a little foundation of information. You give them a little bit of data like this. You give them some questions that they can answer. They figure them out. You give them more data, and then they figure it out. More data, and they just continue to build on that foundation. But they're always figuring out and explaining. Now, what happens at the end of this is you can see this equation here, Q equals M times C times delta T. They have developed that. So which case, in this, the process-oriented guided inquiry, they develop the equation or the relationships and the concepts, then we discuss them. Okay? It's not me standing up there and lecturing or show them how to do anything. They're figuring out how to do it and then explaining it to me in the debrief. So down here, the data that they put into this equation is stuff that they just gathered earlier in the period. So they then with me just kind of guiding them a little bit, they figure out the equation, they put it in, and they tell me how many joules of energy are given off when sodium chloride dissolves, how many joules of energy are dissolved when sodium bicarbonate is dissolved, and how many joules of energy are given off when their calcium chloride dissolved. Okay? Okay, then after that, they design a lab, and food is huge. If you can incorporate food into any particular assignment that they're doing in any culture, that's going to be a big winner. So I had them design the process, you know, and they were given guidance. They were able to use their computers for this, and where they would take and burn the food and capture the heat in the water in a soda can. Okay, and then they actually did a innovation of that where they were designing a more efficient apparatus. This over here, I just wanted to show this real quick. It was a great lab. The kids actually did this where they heated coral to make the lining of the salt drying ponds that are done down by the ocean. Yeah, and this is an example. These are, well, I have more labs than this. I couldn't fit any more on this page, but there's a lot of ways that you can incorporate culture. It's just a matter of sitting down and working together to do it. And that's one of the things that I really want you to be able to do is work in groups. You know, have somebody there that you can bounce ideas off. Some people, you know, it may come a little bit quicker. You know, look at that as being those are your resources. And what strategies would you use to increase engagement? How would you incorporate the culture? And down here, there's also a link for the template that I was talking about. And so this one you can actually take a picture of, or we can come back and I'll put it up while we're talking in just a few minutes. Okay, now here's the big thing. This was the evidence that I had. Back in 2010, 2011, that was the last time I failed a student. Okay, I think the best chemistry teacher there, but my students on the national average, on the national test, were still scoring below average. Okay, I mean, but they weren't failing chemistry, not a whole lot of them, only a couple of them per year out of the 83. But still, I had kids getting D's that I felt like, I know that they can do better, getting C's, and I knew they could do better. So, but what happened in 2012, 2013, I started infusing culture as the driver, and my average went up to about 83%. And it kind of stayed there. I was getting a little bit better as I went down here, but the problem was, you know, the students were getting a little bit weaker and weaker. Okay, they were coming in less prepared. Now we got down here to 2017, 2018. That was where I really started focusing an awful lot more on removing the barriers down here, and the scores went up. And the last year here, 2018, 2019, we're getting to a good solid B+ average, and I had nobody getting a D. So only 4 people just got a little bit below 75%. This year, no COVID-19. It's a secure exam that I couldn't really give, you know, by Zoom. Okay, so down this last little slide that I have here is give the students a plan. Have them work on a plan. What are you going to do to be an active learner going forward? Okay, are you going to Google a topic to look on a Wikipedia page before you go into class? Am I going to Google the relevance of this or connection to the culture of this? You want the kids to, once they leave your class, they go to the next class, or they go into a post-secondary or whatever. The teachers may not be doing anything to help them become an active learner. Okay, so they have to have a plan. What's my plan? How am I going to get my questions answered? Am I going to be asking them in class? Am I going to be asking the teacher or professor after class? Am I going to go in during an office hour? What is the plan? Okay, how do I plan for test preparation? How do I organize my resources? What's my plan for working with somebody else? So what I told my kids this year is I want them to kind of like, you know, tape this in your locker, tape it up on, you know, in the wall of your room. I want you to have it sitting there in your backpack. I want you to have it and constantly refer to it to remind you, prepare for success. Okay? This is more of link to Google Drive. I got a folder in there that has a bunch of stuff in. That's you could take a look at that. And again, it's the same link to the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. Now, yeah, I looked at this, and actually when I received the Shell Award during the acceptance speech, I basically said this was just recognizing that culture-based education is superior. Okay, it is the best way to teach kids. Oh, very quickly, these are my grades with Mrs. Krause in first grade. I started out as a B student, and then by the end of the year, I was getting lots and lots and lots of A's. I even had some outstandings over here. Man, that was, for me going after this, it was kind of an aberration. Now, I want you to take a look. Here's my 7th grade report card. I can't find all of my report cards. My GPA was a 2.3. I was not a good student. And so, in which case, I was just kind of like a lot of kids. I was just lost in there. You know, I had my other Native friends, and it was the same way. We were just in there kind of like wishing we were outside. But, so in which case, none of these teachers would have ever said that I was smart. Okay? Mrs. Krause told me I was. My 12th grade math teacher, Mr. Ryan, told me I was. You know, people, a lot of people that I knew, when I hang out with like Ray Henry or Willie Anderson, and their parents and their elders would tell me I was really smart. But in a Western education, I wasn't smart. But I want to show you the next one, really to indicate that me and so many of my friends are just very poorly rated. We're very poorly rated going through school. And the problem was, for a lot of them, they did not have Mrs. Krause to be able to prove to them that they were smart, and their self-perception just wasn't there. I was actually I did this for like a year. Was in the Mensa High IQ Society, but I was a poor student. So let me escape out of this and see what kind of questions we have. Stop share. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
Awesome job, Joel. One thing I was thinking about is, as you were sharing out different techniques for engagement for students, just considering, you know, all the closures and just the way that the direction that we're going right now, have you thought about how you will incorporate those same techniques, you know, through remote or distance learning?
Okay. Yes. So I had to do it for 7 weeks. You know, and I had about 3 days to prepare. So that was kind of like just total stress. So what I did was, with the things that they're working on, we couldn't do labs. I went into my lab and I did some stuff as a demo type of things. It made them really wild and funny and stuff like that to engage the kids. But you can't do labs. We had no access to kids doing the materials, and they couldn't do it safely. But for instance, for the process-oriented guided inquiries, they would do that. The breakout rooms would be the same pairs. They were pre-assigned, and I would make sure that the 2 people were very compatible. I wouldn't put in a breakout room 2 students that are just totally silent. So I'd always have to pair them to the point of where I knew that they would be engaged. And so that I would put them in the breakout rooms. And so if I had, say, 20 kids in the class, I'd have 10 breakout rooms. And as a teacher, you know, the person who's in control, you can go from breakout room to breakout room to breakout room. So I would just go back and forth and check to make sure they're engaged, answer any questions. And then as they would get done, you know, I'd go ahead, submit it, you know, submit the Google Doc back to for submission. And then they would head back right into the regular main room and wait. And then once we got everybody back, then we would have the debrief. So I could do a lot of that just by using breakout rooms. And the same thing would happen relative to when they would do the pre-assessment. There were 20 students. I'd have 20 breakout rooms with 1 person in each just working on it. Okay? Because it's meant to be done individually. After the initial pre-assessment, everything else is is pretty much done in pairs. So for like the predict and explain, what I could do with that was I put them in breakout rooms of 2, come back, and then I could actually do it as a demo. They wouldn't do the hands-on, but I could do it as a demo, and then he would sit and record the information, the numbers that they had, and go ahead and just kind of fill it in. So a lot of it can still be done utilizing the breakout rooms, but the problem, it's more difficult to go around and take a look at what they're writing. You can listen to what they're saying in there, and that's almost as equally important.
Yeah.
It's just definitely not, it's not a perfect substitute for in class. It's definitely not as fun. But yeah, that's the way that I do it. If you're going to do group work, then use the breakout rooms. Definitely. We were living in fear. The school originally wanted us to use like Microsoft Teams, which is not as student friendly as this. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, we did it. We're going to have to do some of the distance learning. I'm not looking forward to it. I just really, really, really love the in-person stuff. I can't remember anywhere in Hawaiian or Tuscarora culture where you did something with Zoom.
Yeah, I know it's going to be, definitely a challenge, especially as a lot of us are going to be welcoming students that we've never met before. So kind of creating that community early on is going to be an exciting and new challenge that we have to look forward to, especially even in our native SOAR class. So much of it is based off of that family and community relationship. So thank you.
Yeah, well, what was proposed yesterday by our principal is he's only bringing, like, for instance, the first regular teaching day, grades 10 and 11 will come back, and 9 and 12 will be home. And then the next day, the 9 and 12 will be there, and 10 and 11 will be home. You kind of like do 3 days on, 2 days off in terms of but try to get it to the point of where only half the kids are there at a time to separate them. So part of the time you're alternating pretty much between distance learning. You're doing 3 out of, what are you doing? 3 days in school, 2 days, and we alternate, odd and even. So Monday is 1, 3, 5, 7. Tuesday is 2, 4, 6, and then an activity. So I only see my kids normally every other day, but out of the 5 days I would see a particular class in 10 days, 3 of them will be in person, 2 of them will be, distance learning, and then the following 2 weeks it reverses. So, but that's going to allow us enough in-person time at the beginning to establish that relationship. The in-person part that you got to do. If we did just strictly distance learning, I think I'd go insane. It would just drive me crazy. I mean, I almost did back in the spring when I didn't see him for 7 weeks, except, by Zoom. That was harsh.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel, for your inspiration. I definitely, what stuck out to me was the passive versus active part of your presentation. I never thought of putting that up in my classroom and talking to kids about what an active learner looks like and what a passive learner looks like. And now that we're moving into, remote learning, definitely talking to, having a presentation on that with third graders about this is what an active participant in online learning looks like and versus a active learner. And so definitely inspires me as a teacher. So we are at the 1 hour and 20-minute mark. Just a couple of reminders. Next week, we will not be having a Zoom presentation. It's not until the 15th. I know our material advertising said that we were having one on the 8th. It's actually the 15th, and we will be welcoming cartoonist Ricardo Cate into our circle, and he'll be doing a presentation on how laughter has helped him heal and move through this journey of during COVID-19. We are also seeking a presenter for our July 29th lecture series. So if you are interested, please reach out to Felice, Amanda, or myself. I thank you all for joining us today. It was good to see everybody, and I hope to see you back on the 15th as we hear Ricardo Cate share his journey as a cartoonist.